Well, it'll be interesting to see if anybody does get the bell today. Oh, things are happening in my office. I'm looking back thinking I'm starting to look at how to do things differently for YouTube. I feel like I need a change. So I've started sort of moving things around. So you will see the evolution of my office. Too funny. So I have a ring light there. So that's the start. I've also got some new tripods coming so we can do the readings face to face rather than just seeing my hands. So once I get fully set up, I'll be able to change the way you see the readings. So I'm looking forward to that. So let's hope everybody gets the bell today. It seems that that bell is a bit intermittent. So hopefully we'll get it today. All right, so let's do some daily reads for you. I'm going to read from the Fairies Oracle again, although I'm probably already due for a change. I still have this whole sexy husky thing going on apparently too. Hey Denise, so you're first up today. Did you get the bell? Because yesterday nobody got the bell, so people were writing to me all day and saying didn't get the bell. Yeah, so I've still got the husky sort of voice happening here. I actually feel fabulous today. I'm ready to run a marathon, but you didn't get the bell again. How very interesting. Okay, well, let's hope everybody does. I might have to start perhaps sort of giving everybody a bit of a warning on Facebook, on YouTube. Maybe that's the way to go. All right. Oh, well, we have Penelope Dreamweaver here, and she's the card of 28. Penelope Dreamweaver. Looks pretty beautiful in that card. So this is about seeking visions and inspiration. Be aware that they are often subtle and require close attention. Fantasy dreams and daydreams are all places an inspiration fairy can contact us, but she can also pop up unannounced in the midst of the most ordinary of activities, in the bath, washing the dishes, driving the car, or anywhere else that our mind is half occupied and half running on idle. Pay special attention to unsought inspirations at these times. They have something wonderful to offer you, but it's up to you to catch them and bring them into reality. Wow, there you go. So you've got fairy support at the moment. So it looks like we're all trying to get this awakening. We've got everybody around us giving a little bit of a shove. And it'll be interesting to see how many people listen. All righty. Oh, it's one of those days I've got the hair. Oh, I found it. I was going to say I've got a hair in my mouth and I'm not really sure what it belongs to. All righty, let's read one of these guys. The Wings of Wisdom. It's really a little sad that the bells don't always go off, though, because I know that there was a few people who wanted to talk about specific things today, so hopefully they'll get on. All right. How funny. We have the card of the Parrot. Okay, and this is about pleasure, fun, and connection. I am vibrant, playful, and free. Open your heart to loving and supporting others and allow them to love and support you also. Trust your natural desire to reach out to others. You will be able to discern the relationships that are healthy and nourishing from those that are not right for you. Listen to your intuition. You have deeper connections with others on this planet than you may recognize. Your life is meant to be joyful, and you are asked to support this by making more time for play. Give yourself permission to enjoy your natural beauty. Preen and strut your stuff in a way that feels good for you. So very much about being able to listen to the messages and act on what you're receiving, which is really, really nice. I did a finance reading this morning because somebody said about finance, and a lot of that came out around your core beliefs about making money. And it's funny, "Hey, how you going? How are you, Melissa?" Um, because I'd always had this thing. I think I said to some of you, I had an Akashic record done, and sometimes, we worry that we're not doing exactly what we're meant to do. And when I did that, there was so much of it that I was already doing, and I was pretty pleased that I was sort of on the track with that. But there's been a lot of beliefs I've had along the way that I've had to change in regards to myself and my own beliefs. And a couple of them came up in the reading. And one that's been coming up a lot lately is around poverty consciousness. Now, for some unknown reason, and probably for me, when you consider, a lot of us were only born outside of a major war. Some 15, 20 years before we were born. And I know when family spoke about that, they talked about the fact that they had been raised in very sort of poor climates, people eating. Oh, good for you, Melissa. Paramedicine. Yeah, I just have a feeling that's the way you'll go, but it's your choice. So a lot of people were raised in poverty and were raised in a very poor environment. And I guess, like I look back at my life and I think, when we were kids, we were always told we were very, very poor. They supplied vitamin C through certain things at school and through our families. So our families were given certain foods to try and boost us up because we were sort of children of the people that had been in the war before us. So we had things like Del Rosa syrup, orange juice, milk at school, and we had this stuff which was, "Hey Gigi, how you going?" A malt extract, what they called malt extract, and it came with cod liver oil. And I loved it when I was a kid, but it burped like fish, so it tasted all right going down, but it was foul when you repeated. And we had families that were very, very poor. So most of us never knew what I am. I'm great. Thanks, Joanne. I'm fabulous today. Most, apart from this sexy sort of husky thing I've got going on, I'm great. Hey, Lauren, how you going? I'm just going to talk on poverty consciousness. So, many of us were raised not having anything new. And I was the eldest child of 5. And I still got hand-me-downs. I still got other people's things. I remember getting my first pair of new shoes when I was I was at school. So I'd already been at school for a little while. So I may have been about 6, 7 years old. And the shoes then, of course, were, I can't remember the name of them, but they were very, very famous at that time. And you went in and they measured up your feet for these shoes. And I felt very important getting a brand new pair of shoes. I got my first coat when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, my first new anorak. Other than that, everything I'd had was secondhand. My toys were secondhand. My bike was secondhand. In fact, the kid up the road took special pleasure in telling me that my father had resprayed the bike for me. So, yes, we were, "Hey, Carla, how you going?" So we had everything secondhand. We were constantly told as children how poor we were. And there seemed to be this sort of attitude that rich people didn't deserve to be rich, and people didn't deserve to have money. And there was always this attitude of, sharing the wealth and, people not having enough. So we grew up very, very much in that mindset. In fact, as I got older, I found it ridiculously hard to throw things away because then obviously I got married to someone who was a gambler. So I got married at 19 to a man who was a heavy gambler. And that meant we didn't have much because the money went on gambling. So I struggled for many years. My children were all born. We struggled money-wise. And I remember being pregnant with my first child and only having 2 outfits. So I had one to wear out, one dress to wear out, and the other, a friend had said, because I was pregnant, someone said to me, "Just wear a bikini and put an apron over the top of it," because in those days you didn't really share, your belly. So that's what I lived in for the time I was pregnant. So still this mentality of poor, being poor, not having enough, and struggled for many, many years with that, not having enough food in the house, um, not knowing from one week to the next whether we would have any money. And I worked pregnant till I was like 8 months pregnant, and went back to work when my children were very, very young, and we're talking weeks. I was still breastfeeding, because we didn't have the money. So after many years of struggling with that, I still had this mentality of what it was like to be poor. And I think that this has taken a lot of adjusting for me, because I'd always been really, even though I'd had, the kid's father around, I'd really been, for the most part, the provider for the family. So that made it really difficult for me to understand about money. So then as years went by, I started to think, well, if I educated myself better, if I hadn't have left school so early, maybe it was me. So I started to educate myself, and I started to throw every course, every degree, everything I could get my hand on, until I worked my way up the ladder. And when I hit pretty close to the top at operations, I was like, it's great to have the money, but I still found it really, really difficult to part with things. So I remember going out and throwing out a lot of things. I mean, at the age of probably 40, I still had things that I'd had when I was in my 20s, maybe even younger, still in my wardrobe, because of this fear of not having enough. So I'd hung on to everything for all that time, trying to make sure that I didn't experience the poor again. And I hear people talking about poverty consciousness, and I think, if you look back at your life and you see what your parents taught you, or what you learned through your relationships or the people that were around you, would probably understand why it is you have this idea that money is a bad thing, because we rely so much on it to get us our everyday stuff. And when we don't get what we want, we think it's something to do with us. So we take it very personally. So what happens is you grow up with this idea that you are the reason you don't have enough money to do things. And I remember, some time ago, let's just talk about, further down the track, where I finally got, to sort of get myself on top of things. I had a really good job. My partner and I owned a house in Queensland, and it was the first time I'd ever owned a house. And I remember standing in the kitchen one day and thinking, wow, this is great. I've finally got my own place. And I was so pleased with it. It was a beautiful house. And I lived in Queensland for several years. And then my ex-partner lost his job, and I couldn't afford to pay for the house on my own. So I lost the house. And so it's been like that all through my life, in terms of not really being able to understand how to sort of maintain my own security. So this last few years, or last several years, I've done a lot of work on trying to understand why it is that some people do so well financially and other people seem to struggle all the time, from week to week, from dollar to dollar. And I feel that it's so much around how you were raised, what sort of attitude your parents had. Yeah, see, I want to come back to you, Lauren, because you need a slap for that. But I'll come back to you in a moment for it. Okay, so I don't mean it. A proverbial slap. But it comes back to how we were raised and our attitudes around our own value. So this cuts much deeper than saying to you, you've got a poverty consciousness and you need to know how to work on that. So if you feel that you struggle financially, if you feel that and you're talking to someone here I've lived in cars, I've lived on the streets. So you're talking to someone who's come back from that stuff. So it's not like I don't have the experience of having nothing. I do have the experience of having no food in the house and having to go ask charities for food. So I know what it's like to be down there. I also know what it's like to be up there too. So I've done a pretty big sort of range of things in my life where I've had to struggle and I've had a lot. So um, now I sort of sit back and I think, we think poverty consciousness is maybe not as ingrained in us as it is. Now, Lauren here says, I can't complain about what we had growing up, about how well I've done with jobs, etc. But I always thought as myself, as long as I can pay the mortgage bill and foods, I don't care about anything else. Poverty consciousness right there. So the reason I'm saying that you need to have a clip around the ear for that is because you're saying that all you want from the universe is enough to get by. And that's not all you want. So you never limit yourself in your language by saying, as long as I have this, I'm happy. As long as I can feed my children, I'm happy. As long as I have a roof over my head, I'm happy. Because that is what the universe will provide you with. No more. Because what you're manifesting is what you're asking for. So if you're asking for that, then that is all that's going to come to you. So it's very difficult sometimes to understand how our language influences what we do. So you have to start to understand poverty consciousness is ingrained in the language we use. It's ingrained in your core beliefs. It's ingrained in everything you do. So if you're going to review this, you have to start understanding where to start with it. So what sort of things did your parents do or say when you were young that made you think you didn't have enough? Because I've seen people out there smoking, drinking alcohol, complaining about how they don't have enough money to pay the rent. So there's obviously an issue and problem with some of those things where you need to question, do I have my priorities right? But there's also this question you need to have around, how do I think of myself in the world? What do I think I deserve? And if you don't think you deserve anything, then your language is going to reflect, I don't deserve anything. So, see, I'm listening to you guys talking, thinking this is big for you guys, really big. Yeah, see, there you go. So there's this sort of ingrained beliefs, Gigi, about what our parents taught us, that men, and I've seen this happen to people where their fathers have died and left all the money to the males and nothing to the females, even in this day and age. So women are told pretty much from the beginning. Now, I'm not blaming anybody here. I don't blame. I think it's a really good lesson for us to learn. So, a lot of women struggle with that because they're trying to fill in all the gaps and trying to understand why they are still the underclass when it comes to the male-female dominant thing. And it's really easy for us to go through life thinking that we are doing well. We struggle. Okay, so you can be in a job where you're working, I don't know, 50, 60 hours a week. I've done that too. Trying to make sure I had enough money, trying to make sure that everybody had enough, everybody around me, my kids had enough clothes. I struggled to, I spent a lot of years as a single parent. I struggled to make sure that they had enough. And I worked and worked and worked and worked. And I never seemed to have enough. And then going back a few years ago, I decided that I would give the higher level jobs away and I would grab a job that was paying a whole lot less so I could have a bit of my life back. So I did just that, and I dropped over 50,000 in pay, plus all the resources. So I no longer had a work car. I no longer had my phone bills paid, my working from home benefits, and went back to a job that paid me a good bulk of my salary. And I dropped back, and I remember thinking, how am I going to make this work? I remember looking at my salary thinking, wow, this is such a huge drop for me. And I had to buy a car, and I then had to pay for my own petrol and my own phone bills, everything. And I thought, this is going to be really difficult. But it wasn't. It made no difference to me whatsoever. Not a thing. Never noticed any of it. It felt exactly the same. And I was like, that's really strange. And now I can go home when I finish work. So I was finishing work at like 3:30 and 4 o'clock. and going home, and I still had enough to pay the rent and I still had enough to eat. And in fact, I think in some ways I was quite much better off financially. And I think that, you start looking at all the ways you spend your money, and all of a sudden you're doing things differently. So I think that we have this idea that what we want in life, we have to work hard for. And I think that's a fallacy. I think it's an absolute fallacy. So you're talking, somebody who's gone from working 50, 60 hours a week to still working down to 35 or 37 and having this, life back again and not really feeling the pinch of the money whatsoever. But the one thing that started to happen to me was I started to adjust the way I thought about it. So I went into sort of having a look at the childhood stuff. So if you think about the sort of things you were told as a child about money, because I remember people talking about people with money like they were evil. How many people heard that? People who had lots of money were evil. I mean, I guess if you're poor and you're trying to show people, like your family, that you're doing the very best, you want to shine in their eyes. And if you've been raised by people who've been perhaps a little bit harsh, a little bit cruel, or parenticized their children, you may think that you have some sort of responsibility about that. So, I mean, we were poor anyway, but to be having that sort of told to you every day of your life about how poor you were and you couldn't have things. I remember, going to school and doing, winning the swimming competitions or badges or whatever we called them in those days. And my parents wouldn't pay for me to have they were stars that they gave us, but we had to pay for them, even though we technically, won them for what we'd done, and my parents wouldn't pay for them. And we never had photographs, school photos either. So there was a lot of poorness sort of wrapped up in me from an early age. And I know now that this is so much about what I am doing in the work I do. So when I go back to the Akashic Records, the one thing that came across in those, which I thought was really important, is the fact that I've learned you never, ever limit yourself to what you can have. Spirit doesn't sit up there and say you can't have things, you've got to stay poor. Spirit does not sit around saying you can only have what you need. So the first time I realized this really, really strongly was when I first really started doing this work as a more professional thing, and I started doing the fairs. And I'd go to a fair. It would cost me like $100, $150 to have a fair for the day. And I'd go and I'd get, several readings, and I'd come home and I would be really happy because I'd got to do what I wanted for the day. So I was extremely happy because I enjoyed doing it so much. And I would have made enough to cover the stall, enough to cover my petrol. And if I had to stay away from home, enough to cover the hotel or whatever. And I remember having this really sort of limited attitude about, okay, if I've got enough and I've covered my costs, well, then I'm happy. But then you see, I started to realize I was devaluing myself, because even though I was doing what I wanted to do, it still meant I was out the house for a day. It still meant I was technically working, and there was nothing there to reward me for what I'd done. So it's time. Well, I'll be happy if this happens, or I'll be happy if I'm happy if I've got that. And I thought, wow, this is like going back to my childhood. This is like going back and hearing, my parents say to me, oh, well, as long as we've got enough to put a roof over your head, as long as we've got enough. And we were poor, like I said. So I remember it used to be so exciting when my parents went shopping, because they rarely seemed to do that. And when they went shopping, they would come back with these awesome foods. And sometimes we would get some, and sometimes my parents just ate them in front of us, which was really awful. But that was the sort of lifestyle we had. So I can remember sort of thinking, wow, this shopping thing, that only happens once in a blue moon. And, my parents come home with food. And it was just so exciting to see that happens, whereas it should be such a normal thing for people. You shouldn't even notice that. But that's how my thinking was as a child. So you can imagine growing up with that sort of mentality where you can't afford anything. And then, of course, I get into a marriage where it's reaffirmed for me that life is extremely difficult and you can only afford to have enough just to keep you alive. It doesn't happen like that. And I got the message so long ago to start thinking about how people say things and how they understand what they have in the world. If it's only just enough to satisfy them, doesn't mean that is enough for you. If you want to have more, you need to ask for more. There's nothing wrong. There is nothing greedy about it. There is nothing selfish about it. You deserve to have everything you want in this lifetime. If you want to restrict yourself from having that because you've got some sort of guilt complex or some sort of attitude of having too much is greedy or wrong, then you need to review how you think about things, because nothing is like that at all. That's your core beliefs. So it doesn't mean now that I go out and spend willy-nilly. I don't really do a whole lot. I don't smoke. I very rarely have a drink. I'm not a person who gambles or wastes money in that regard. Wasting. See, there it is. But I don't do those things. So when I want something, I feel comfortable buying it for myself because maybe I didn't have that for a long time. So I have no guilt about tarot cards and crystals because I love them. And I have no guilt about spending money on other people because I love to do that. I have no guilt about going out and getting my nails done when I want to because it's my pleasure to do that. I don't ever want to feel guilty. And somebody over here said the other day that somebody said to them about getting their nails done. I've had that said to me. How can you afford to get that done every week? Well, how can you afford to drink? How can you afford to smoke? How can you afford to go out and do what you do? Like, we all have our own pleasures, and that's okay. There's nobody that's saying to you you can't do things other than people who limit you by telling you you can't do things. So instead of saying to yourself, I'm okay. I'm okay as long as I've got enough food in the cupboard. Don't put that limit there. That's like stopping you here from growing. Don't even think about it that way. Try and find some other way to say it. Something like, I would like to have enough in life so I can live the abundant life I would like for myself. I would like to have enough money to be able to do all of the things I want to do in life. I would like to be abundant. I would like to be able to have money in the bank all the time. Or I have money in the bank all the time. Take it one step further, because you already have this stuff. And if you have a look at some of the things that are promoted around, things like The Secret and the Abraham Hicks and things like that, they all talk about the fact you already have these things. But when you limit yourself, you stop yourself attaining those things or getting to those points. Restrictive thoughts. Hayley's spot on with that. Why a caged bird sings. We don't realize what we do to ourselves. We don't realize. So going back, 3 weeks ago now, I decided to cut my work back to 3 days a week. So you're looking at a person who's been working since they were maybe 13 years old. I'm a workaholic. I understand that I have some things that probably I've had to work on over the years, like perfectionism. I feel like it hurts me to say that one. Perfectionism, workaholism. Okay, they've been the two primary ones that I've had a lot of difficulty working with. Thinking I have to do the best and be the best at everything. That it's been a really hard one for me, because being the eldest child in a family like that with a lot of other issues and problems, I grew up with a very poor self-esteem and very poor confidence. So I struggled to be seen. I felt like I was invisible. So the only way I could be visible was by being exceptionally good at everything I did. I couldn't fail, because if I failed, I would kick and beat myself up until I just was a mess in the corner. I couldn't deal with it. So the workaholism thing started quite young. And at an early age, probably 13, 14 years old, I had a job on Saturdays. I had a job Saturday and Sunday. I had a job Saturday, Sunday nights. I never really did very much because I was allowed to work, but I wasn't allowed to go out and play with friends. So I worked all the time. So I worked after school, I babysat, I worked in a cafeteria, I picked mushrooms. I worked in a hairdressing salon for ridiculously poor money, but I wanted to have money myself. I wanted to be self-sufficient. So I think that from a very early age, I thought money was something I had to work so very, very hard for. So I have worked all my life. I have worked sometimes more than one job. I've worked a ridiculous amount of hours. I have done that sometimes by myself. And so going into part-time work for me was a challenge. So in the last 3 years, I've gone from working in a job that paid over, 120K, car, phone, computer, other benefits, working from home, extra costs for that. So I've gone from that down to working for a government job, which was nearly half the pay, and thinking I would never survive in that job. And then I have now gone down to part-time, which is the first time I've ever worked part-time. So I think I had a little bit of part-time work and a little bit of casual work at intervals along the way when I was nursing and pregnant. I think I did cut back a little bit sort of when it became uncomfortable, but it was more about the manager coming to me and saying, you really can't work that like pregnant. What's this? You can't keep working while you've got this big belly. It doesn't look good on us. So I cut back a couple of times with things like that along the way, but I'm now working part-time and I'm really loving it. And at first, it frightened the life out of me because I kept thinking, am I going to have enough? So again, coming back to that whole idea of how your thinking is, that was the first place I went to. Am I going to have enough? Crazy, isn't it? So it's still something I'm working with. So I'm not here to tell you that I've got it right. I'm here to tell you that I'm still working on my core beliefs. I'm still working on the things that hold me back. But I never limit myself now. And I know that Spirit's backed me so many times on that by saying to me, don't ever think you've got enough. You have what you want. You don't have just what you need. And I have the job of teaching you how to do that. That's part of the work I do, teaching you how good you can become, how many resources are at hand for you, what you can attain if you want to. The sky's the limit. There is no glass ceiling here. So, Melissa, I get it, and it's scary. But what you've got to be careful too is that you don't get in the mindset like I did, where I went, oh my goodness, am I going to be able to manage on half the money again? You can't get in that mindset. You have to get in the mindset of there is enough for me. I will be able to do what I need to do. There is enough for me out there. And you have to start thinking about it very different. So when you hear yourself saying it, and you need to be, I'm always telling you guys, be the observer in your life. Be the observer. You've got to watch how you say things. And I hear it all the time. If I'm around someone who says something, I pull them up. I don't have any hesitation. I had a bit of a thing the other day because on my page, somebody told me I was aggressive. I'm like, I'm not aggressive. I'm assertive. I'll say it how it is, but I'm not aggressive. If you say something negative, I will pull you up on it. because it's not good for you. It's not good for you to limit yourself. You are here to have the best life possible. And human beings make sure through their own jealousies, their own insecurities, their own ignorance, that they pull you down. And your parents probably thought they were doing you a favor by telling you how hard it is in the world and how hard it is to make money, and you'll never become famous and be what you want to be. Because that's what they tell you, because they think they're keeping you safe. They don't want you to fail at anything. So if I tell you how hard the world is, you're not going to fail. Crazy, isn't it? Beautiful. Okay, good example, Lauren. Beautiful. A good example though. So when we started to work from home, so I work for a place where sometimes we are very much micromanaged in our work. So KPIs, all that sort of stuff. And when we started working from home, there was this big push from some of the managers around, keeping an eye on us, making sure we were doing our work and everything else. Everybody's working from home at the moment. And guess what? The government's saying we are more productive working from home than we were ever working in the. So they're all been worried about it. Oh my goodness, everybody's working from home. They may not get their work done. Our pockets will not be lined with gold because they don't have a ceiling on how much money they can make, obviously. We've proven them wrong. Our productivity has soared. The unions are saying now this is a whole new life for people. People will be able to work from home now because actually places that employ you may not need to cover their costs so much anymore. So let's see. I just want to read a few of your see, Lauren, how many times do you in the day think I won't have enough time to get things done? I've got so much on my plate. How am I going to ever get anything done? And you do. But next time you'll say it again. I don't have enough time to get things done. Poverty consciousness. You have plenty of time. You have plenty of money. And you just have to learn to not think about it in the way you're thinking about it. It will come to you easily, Melissa. It will come to you easily. It's on your path. It's there for you. You just have to choose it. Once it's chosen, that's it. It's there for you. You have this beautiful spirit of give. You are supposed to work with people. You're just finding your path, and it's going to change a few times for you too. Hayley, you always have a lovely way of putting things. That's really funny. And workers are happier working from home, indeed. And they get to spend time taking their children to school, picking the children up, spending time with them that they don't normally do. So the whole family in that regard's happy. Although I do understand we've had some surge in domestic violence, and I would imagine that's because some people can't get away from perhaps not very nice situations. You have plenty of time. Time is just not a factor. We rush around thinking we don't have enough time. We rush around thinking we don't have enough money. All of those things are just things that you've been told. It's all an illusion. It was all an illusion to stop you failing, to keep you under control. That's what we talk about when we talk about illusions. We do it to ourselves. It's crazy, but we do. Gigi, I've been a nurse for 35 years. I transferred to a clinic to mirror your children's school, always worked alongside social justice. People think you have positions of power. It's interesting, isn't it? That's interesting. I think no matter what we do in this world, if we're doing, what we have to do or what we need to do, oh yeah, I did boards for a long time. I had a really good placement on a board for about 2 years with like a Christian Brothers Association, working with them to improve housing for young people. And that was a very, very positive placement because they really did respect. I worked in a refuge. I worked with homeless kids, so they really respected me. And I remember when I gave up that position, I remember when I gave up the position, they sent me like a reference, I guess, to say thank you for what I'd done, and it was the most beautiful thing. It was just amazing. So those sort of things I get, but I've sat on a lot of boards and a lot of positions where I have not really felt listened to. Usually find you get, maybe two or three very dominant people there, and they're fixed in their ideas, so they don't really listen to what you have to say, and I find that frustrating. So I gave it away a long time too. So I've had the experiences of both good and bad in regards to sitting on committees and boards. So yeah. But anyway, so I want to go back to the poverty consciousness thing. So if you are trying to understand this, be the observer in your life. Like I tell you this all of the time. Don't get sort of sucked up into your emotions or other people's ideas about how to live your life. Be an observer. Watch what you say. Watch what you do. Watch how you respond. It is such a good way to be. It's about being emotionally intelligent and understanding that a lot of the stuff we carry with us, we really don't need, and it needs to go so that you can move further, so that you can have so much more in life. But also, if you want to look up on YouTube, there are some fabulous people on YouTube who talk about some of these things around your core beliefs. Oh, that sounds beautiful, Denise. The baby cuddler in the neonatal unit. That sounds really cool. So if you want to look up on YouTube, yes, there's some great, I don't know what you call people, they're probably gurus really. And there's a couple of young guys who do talks on things. I can't remember their names offhand. But both of them, Jake Ducey, I think is one of them. Actually, Sarah's not online. We were talking about him before. He's a little bit sort of different, but his ideas are really cool. So you may not agree with everything those people say either. Oh, Aaron Doherty's the other one. Aaron Doherty. A friend says, be in the audience, not on the stage. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That's about observing yourself, isn't it? And that's what I always say, be the observer. Observe, don't absorb. Life is not supposed to be like that. But we become, oh, you like Aaron, yeah. So some of those people are, yeah, sometimes they're a little bit left of center, a little bit quirky, a little bit different. But listen with disdain. Listen with be selective about what you take with you. Just because someone says it to you, like me sitting here saying what I'm saying, some things you may not agree with, and that is okay. It's okay not to agree with everything someone says, but take what you do feel right with. And I'm sitting here thinking, I bought a chair today. Look at me. So I'm leaning on the arms of the chair. I bought a chair the other day. My daughter put it together for me today. I have an office chair now, so I can sort of do the swingy thing. I've had the same chair for like 100 years that I've got over there. It's a wooden chair and it has a Winnie the Pooh pillow on it. And I decided to treat myself to an office chair. So that's why I'm swinging and leaning. See, yeah, I can understand that with the political stuff. Yeah. And I get that. I get that they have to have committees, but a lot of the time, one or two people are just dominating the committee. And you get up and you're working because obviously, I was doing the work. And you'd come in and you'd say, okay, this needs to be done. This is what we're currently doing. We need to have a look at how we do this differently. It's really difficult. Maybe we could be doing, because you're on the floor, on the ground. You can see how it needs to be done. And then some person up the top goes, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. What's the next thing on the agenda? So I never felt listened to with that. I felt that I'd struggled for so long to get anybody to listen to the things that had to be done. And of course, sometimes I know in places where I've made changes, as soon as I've gone out the door, they've just changed things back again. So yeah, it's really difficult, that whole committee thing. Yeah, I think take everything with a grain of salt, Queen of Water. You're absolutely correct. If it sits right with you and it makes you think about something, if it makes you change something you're doing, if it makes you do any sort of review on how you're doing things the way you're doing them, then it's been good that you've listened to that. If it doesn't fit with you, doesn't sit right, then at least it's challenged you to think about how you do things. And that is the important thing. But never take something on board that you don't agree with. If you don't agree with it, think about it. Let it change your thinking. Let it challenge your thinking. But you don't have to change because somebody says that's the way to do it. Never. Absolutely. Yes. If it gives you an aha moment, if it gives you that little bit of an epiphany. Sometimes I do it when I'm doing readings. I go, oh, okay. I never saw it that way before. So Spirit still does it with me. But it's just something that you have to start thinking about as you're going. If you have a great team, you can move mountains. Absolutely. And I've had some fabulous teams. I've worked with the most amazing people. I am lucky enough that I have collected some of those people and I still have them with me today. Some of the people who've made such an impact on my life through working with them, which is fabulous. The twin flame experts. Okay. The thing is with the twin flame thing, for some unknown reason, if you're not on a twin flame journey, it's very difficult for you to understand. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is, for some unknown reason, people think that twin flames have only just come out of the woodwork, where if you go back through history, it's documented everywhere. I mean, people like Shakespeare were talking about star-crossed lovers many, many years ago, centuries ago. For some unknown reason, the twin flame relationship is glorified, when in fact it's a very difficult relationship to have. But when people don't understand it, they tend to sort of push it aside. That's why it's really good. Now, nobody ever taught me about twin flame relationships. I didn't learn that from a book. I learned that from Spirit. They were the ones who told me all about it. They told me what it was about, what to expect. And I was told probably 30 years ago. This isn't something that I just pulled out of my backside in the last few weeks. But for some unknown reason, there is this idea where people sort of, first off, don't agree with it. So they sort of say it doesn't exist, which is fine. That's okay. Maybe they've not experienced it themselves. There are other people who think that people say they're twin flame relationships when they've been violent or domestic violence relationships. Not the case. There are people that glorify the romance of it when in fact it's there to teach you how to work better in your own life and to wake up to the things that you weren't doing so well and some of your history. So it's very much a growth lesson, but people don't see all that. So yes, I get it. Yeah, the soulmate thing, probably a little bit, but not quite so much with the soulmates. The other thing that sort of amuses me is how people say you have hundreds of twin flames. I'm like, I don't think that it would be called twin flames if there were hundreds of them. I was told about mine I think I have readings that go back probably close to 20 years that talked about mine. And the fact that I probably would not have the relationship I would dream about until very late in life, where I would be able to get my own career off the ground as well. A lot of this has been told to me from very, very early in my life, and I probably didn't appreciate or respect what I was being told way back when, but I do have all the readings, and some of them are so hugely accurate. Some of the readings now ring very, very true to me after the fact. And I think that's pretty awesome. That's why I say to people, when you have a reading, sometimes people will say, well, how long before that comes true? Well, we don't really know. We may be reading, several years into your future. We may only be reading a few years into your future. But they are definitely something that you need to sort of just take on board and not expect. And again, I say this time and time again, you cannot control what's being told to you. So if you're going to take that reading and expect it to control it to some sort of outcome within a specific period of time, it ain't going to happen. You've got to let it unfold because you have to do the work. And I know there are some fabulous readers on YouTube who are completely aligned with the way I talk, completely. And I think I'm not getting those messages unnecessarily from the place where they're coming from because everything I get is downloaded. So I guess, yeah, see, you've had the messages too, Denise. The thing is, for a lot of us, we've sort of learned that from what we've done. I posted something on, sorry, still not well, but much better than I was. I posted something on my Facebook page some time ago about twin flames. And it was about two saints that we have obviously in our history who were star-crossed lovers. And that went back to the 13th century, I think. And they referred to them then as twin souls, not twin flames. And one was a priest and one was a nun, I think, something like that anyway, that became saints. And the story was absolutely beautiful about them falling in love with each other, but they couldn't be together because of what they'd chosen as their careers. So most of us, if you're spiritually open, will already get this information from spirit. We won't have got it from a book and we won't have got it from other YouTube readers. So when you listen to someone you don't agree with or you don't feel is telling you what you know deep in your intuition, then you know what's best. But it's good for people to tell you that they don't believe or that you're on the wrong track or you haven't got it right, because then you get the opportunity to challenge your own thinking about it and come up with what you know best. And when you come up with what you know best, then you realize how good your intuition is. So when something happens that you felt was going to happen, or something comes to pass that you thought was going to come to pass, and it happens, and it's reaffirmed by spirit, that is so potent because it's much better than hearing it from someone else, because you know in your inner knowing that you are right. So amazing how timing, 2 years on your journey. 2 years on your spirituality journey. Yep. But I bet you had probably before the 2 years. So what you're talking about with 2 years is you're probably talking really being consciously aware. But if you go back in your lifetime, I would imagine there'd be stories there that you could tell about your spirituality that happened long before that, and you didn't really recognize it. So when I was a kid, I used to do things all the time, and I used to think it was just a coincidence. And I can tell you stories that would, blow you away. And I just think back to things like, walking down the street and thinking of a Dalmatian, and all of a sudden somebody would walk around the corner walking a Dalmatian. Or I'd look down on the ground thinking, I just saw someone drop $100 note, and I would look down on the ground and there would be $100 note. And I used to think, wow, what fabulous coincidences. Or as my kids used to call them, coinkydinks. The coincidences. And I think that we dismissed a lot of that stuff when we were young, because we got told, probably by our parents, doesn't exist, you don't know what you're talking about, stop living in fairyland. We got all of those things. So you probably were doing it a long time before you started to accept and be consciously aware of what was going on. Beautiful. Many patterns through the years, yep. So I just wonder, how long a quinkydink, yeah. It's Crazy, isn't it? Um, I wonder, if we'd have been all embraced with that. Like I do it with my kids. Okay, daughter's a good one. She said to me not long ago, I keep thinking of this guy. I knew him years ago. She was like me. She had guy friends a lot too. And she had this friend that she was very, very close to, and they were friends for a very long time. They did sort of try to have a relationship, and it didn't sort of work so well. So they decided not to keep going with that. They would stay friends. And they did. And then he met a girl. And he completely phased her out of his life. And she was really upset about it because she said, I don't really understand. I do understand that he feels uncomfortable having a girlfriend. That's okay. A lot of women not comfortable with that. But he completely just cut her off completely, never said a word, just said he'd found a girlfriend and that was it. And maybe a few years passed. And we were driving somewhere one day and she said to me, Mum, I keep thinking about Daniel. I don't know what's going on. She said, he keeps crossing my mind. I keep thinking, I don't know why that is. And then came the call. So if my kids say things like that, or my kids have ideas or thoughts on something, I take them very seriously. When she said to me, when she said to me about Daniel, I was like, because I know if you start thinking about something, you're going to manifest it. Or are you manifesting, or was it meant to happen? Not quite sure on that one, but that's no coincidence that that happens. And a hooly dooly. um, Yes. So, you think about all these things. Tell me my stories. Um, I used to sleepwalk and sleep talk all the time, and I would say amazing things. My parents thought I was quite mad. I got put on sleeping tonics and whatever else. But I can remember uh, talking witchcraft a few times. So I'd obviously peeled something back from a past life somewhere because I knew nothing about witches or witchcraft. But I did that often when I was sleepwalking. Um, and I can remember running up the stairs, and the funny part was I could hear my bracelets rattling. So I may have been about maybe 13, 14 years old. And I remember, my father yelling out, stepfather yelling out from the bedroom, who is that? What's going on? And I remember saying that something about the witches and witchcraft. And of course, I got punished for that the next day. So, because I woke people up in the house, apparently. Never mind my little visions of witchcraft and whatever's going on. So there were things like that happened from a very early age. I can go back further, but I was treated like I was a little bit crazy. I like a little bit crazy now, but as a kid, I didn't understand that at all. Like I saw things and heard things, and I can remember saying to my parents, and they just thought I was a little bit mad. Um, and I think I told you because I was scared sometimes at night time. So we're going back now probably to about 8, 9 years old. Very insecure, very sensitive child. My parents thought they'd knock that out of me. Um, and their way to manage it, of course, at night time was to take the light out in my bedroom and lock me in my bedroom in the dark. And I was already terrified of ghosts because I saw them all the time. I knew they were there, but I didn't know why. I didn't know how to relate to it. I was terrified. And I think that was partly the reason why I dumped all my psychic ability down deep inside of me for such a long time, because I didn't realize how that was impacting me. So I sort of hid away from things for a very long time and tried to hide behind the logical. And then years later, when my mother became very religious, she did the same thing again. You can't be doing that tarot stuff and doing all the things you're doing. It's bad, it's evil. Well, hang on a moment. There was a group of people who wrote the Bible who were all prophets, seers, and sages. And they all saw into the future. So if there were people writing a Bible with those stories in, why is it wrong to see into the future? Um, I had a friend for a very long time, a male friend. I respected the fact that he was married. Um, I loved him, but I still respected the fact that he was married. If he hadn't have been married, it may have been a different story. But yeah, I think that sometimes, from our perspective, my ex-husband had a best friend who was female. Never really worried me at all. I just think that, if you're going to go off and sleep with someone else or go off and have an affair with someone else, then I wasn't the right person for you. That's the way I see it. I don't see it as a temptation or whatever else, but I just think that, sometimes we tend to look at things as being, we've got to hang on to things for dear life to keep them. Unfortunately, we can't hang on to someone if they don't want to be with us. So, yeah, it's interesting. So my stories, so I have lots of them. I guess you'll hear about them along the way. Once we get on to the G's gang and I can get all that up and going for you, then we can probably talk a little bit more intimately, just to sort of give you an idea of what, this is public domain, so I don't sort of like to really dig deep here, but we can definitely talk a bit more. But I have to go now. It's been an hour. I'm getting very congested, so I need to go and sort myself out. Thank you so much for your mum saw spirits as well. So if your mum sees them, if you're in a family, I've got a friend and her sister's very psychic, and her parents nurtured her, and she's very, very psychic. So I think that if you're, you've got a family who supports you. Hey, Jeanette, how are you going? Hey, Scott, how are you going? I've been on for an hour, but apparently nobody got the bell today. If you're in a family where you are nurtured for your psychic ability, that's why when I read for people, if I can sense their children or their grandchildren have their own little portal to the other side, I say to them, you have a child that's very psychic, and you need to nurture that. So if your child comes to you and is very sensitive, scared of the dark, these are the indicators you'd be looking for. Says strange things or has a strange imagination, fabulous imaginations, then it's probably good to start nurturing that child from then. But don't tell a child they're oversensitive or they're too sensitive, because I don't know. My parents thought that, giving you a good smack for that stuff was a way to get out. You've got to toughen up. I can't. It's who I am. And it may be some of the stuff I've carried around with me since I was a kid. But anyway, I'm getting congested and I need to go and give my voice a rest. I will catch up with you tomorrow. I think we picked it up with yours too, Lauren. And I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me. I've had a great chat. Yes, thank you, Joanne. Thumbs up, everyone. Have a great day. Mwah.